to give the money to charity. After the resignation of Andrew Mitchell and the confusion over energy tariffs, the Prime Minister is hoping to prove that the government is still in touch with people's day-to-day concerns with his plans to reform the criminal justice system. David Cameron pledged a rehabilitation revolution that aims to stop criminals reoffending once they're released from jail. Sky's Home Affairs correspondent Mark White has the details.
For successive Prime Ministers, finding the balance between the public appetite for tough justice and the need to rehabilitate offenders has never been easy. As he toured London's Wormwood Scrubs prison, David Cameron said it was time for a rehabilitation revolution. Cut away the jargon and, in crude terms, like his predecessors, the Prime Minister's back on that tightrope.
On the punishment of criminals, I don't want there to be any doubt that we will be tougher. We've got to give these people a chance, not just for their sake, but for ours. Retribution is not a dirty word. Now, these people need help so they can become part of the solution and not remain part of the problem.
Charles Young spent 22 years of his life inside, convicted of his first offence, aged just 12. He's seen many initiatives in the past and believes the key to cutting crime is simple: jobs.
These kids are going to go down the slippery slope unless you help them visualise their future, see what it is where they're going to go, but also use the alternatives of the armed forces, trades. You know, show these people, show these kids what alternatives there are, positive alternatives.
The government plans to pay organisations that participate in the rehabilitation programme by results, but the money will have to come from already stretched prison and probation service budgets. The Prison Officers Association say that's unsustainable. They point to prison population figures, which in 1994 stood at just over 48,000, managed by almost 24,000 prison officers. Today, there are more than 86,000 inmates and just 22,500 officers.
Until we get to the grassroots levels and divert people away from prison, we're just going to go round in an everlasting circle, and we've got to break that cycle eventually. But I'm afraid payment by results at this moment, I do not believe are the answer.
With an ever-decreasing budget, the government is desperate to stop this cycle of reoffending. For the Prime Minister, this has also been about seizing back the initiative after a turbulent few weeks for his party. Mark White, Sky News.
Well, Sky's chief political correspondent John Craig is in Westminster. And John, it has been a turbulent few weeks for the Prime Minister, hasn't it? How much is this about him trying to recapture the political agenda?
Well, it looks very much like a relaunch, doesn't it? It's been dubbed from hugger hoodie to mugger hoodie because a different tone from that famous speech or notorious speech back in 2006. He never actually said hugger hoodie. That's what Labour claimed he said. But the tone was much tougher here. In fairness to him, some of the ideas he was talking about, bringing in private firms and other agencies to get involved in rehabilitation, they've been developed by this outfit called the Centre for Social Justice, which was a think tank set up by Ian Duncan Smith before he came back into the shadow cabinet, and that's where Mr Cameron was speaking today. It was a much tougher message, wants to sound tough on law and order after the fiasco of holding on to Andrew Mitchell for so long, and that dragged out for so long. So he wanted to get onto some policies that he hoped will cheer up the voters and perhaps remind people that the government is actually taking forward some new initiatives. The only thing is that some critics have pointed out that some of the things he was talking about today, for example, new laws on guns, carrying guns with the intent to supply them, well, that's already in law. It's something that's been talked about before. So as ever with prime ministerial announcements, a lot of what he's been talking about is not entirely new, but he does want to signal that there's a tougher approach to justice and law and order now that Ken Clarke has been replaced by the hardline Chris Grayling at the Minister of Justice. The only thing was, though, that Ken Clarke was rather enthusiastic about cutting his department's budget, and some of these measures he was talking about today will cost money, and there isn't really the money to do it, according to critics.
John, thanks very much. Well, David Cameron's attempt to focus attention back on the topics that concern some voters is likely to